Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're chatting with Emma May. Emma is the founder and creative designer at Sophie Grace Designs. Emma, do you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and your company and what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So I was a lawyer by training. Did that
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, did that for a number of years. Then I had a real estate brokerage, was relatively entrepreneurial, and one day I was having a little meltdown in my closet, getting ready for work. And I was like, why does nobody make like super mix and match modular things for women? Why isn't it comfortable? And then I decided, oh, I should make something like this, and embarked on founding Sophie Grace, which is a women's workwear company. And we make really comfortable modular suiting for women. Modular is such a weird word to use in terms of like fashion stuff, but it's really about everything sort of color coordinates and mixes and matches, and is really, really simple to put together. Yeah.
It's funny because different word for the fashion industry, but it makes sense when you say it, and everybody would clue into that. So that is a good word to use.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. It's like, it's not sexy, but it totally describes what we do.
The look of the clothes is sexy. The word's not sexy.
Yeah, well, it's not even sexy, but it's like, yeah, like sort of that idea of like, how do we talk about it being really like easy to put together, right? Mm-hmm. And modular. I call it like granimals for grown-ups.
Yes,
I don't know if you remember those, right? Like,
yeah. I got enough gray hair to go back.
Yeah, totally, right? Yeah.
So as somebody that is self-admittedly not in the fashion world in any sense,
right.
You can, my 8-year-old shirt, that probably the last thing I bought actually for myself here. What type of clothing are you going after? Like, is it professional work attire? Is that?
So it's professional work attire for women. So it's like blazers and pencil skirts and dresses that you can wear to the office. So it's like really focused around, I kind of sort of have the standard of like, can you wear it to court, right? Like, and that was something that I found in the market was more difficult to find. And I mean, I did launch this pre-COVID too, right? So like literally like 2 weeks before COVID, which is a whole other fucking story. But so it was really about solving a problem for a woman who often is overlooked in the market, right? Like there's lots of sort of casual stuff or fun stuff or crop tops, but how do you actually give these women something that's really, really clean?
Okay. And so you did that right before COVID, you said you launched. What was that like, going through that COVID process? Because I would think that that's an okay time for you to be in that industry.
No, because nobody needed workwear.
Of course.
Right. So we launched with like 12 pieces that were really focused around like the office, right? So it's about this whole idea of like getting ready for work, being able to go into the office, being in the boardroom, being at conferences. Like our whole actual go-to-market plan was about showing up at conferences, being in places where women were, right? Like really coming into that place, right? And so like 2 weeks before we all sort of ended up getting, staying home. 32 boxes showed up on my driveway. Right. And then we had to sort of like talk to our customer and convince our customer. But what was interesting about that, Matt, was that there was one fabric that we used in a couple pairs of pants and in some dresses and skirts. And it was like the super stretch, machine washable, incredibly soft fabric. And people were like, oh my God, these are like the most comfortable work pants I've ever worn.
Yeah.
And they feel like my yoga pants, and I can do my Zoom call. And if I have to like go do something, I can still wear them. So it ended up kind of like, so it wasn't the fabric that we used in everything, but what happened was it really sort of, we leaned into that, and then we made blazers out of it, and we made, right. And people were like, oh, this feels like a sweatshirt. Oh my God, I totally get it now.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So
Yeah.
now coming out of COVID, as people, I don't know, maybe last 18 months have been going back to the office, and a lot of companies are mandating people going back there. Are you seeing a big uptick because of that, or what has that trajectory for your company been?
Well, we were growing like 100% year over year,
Yeah, well, that's great.
right? Which is insane, and it's actually really hard to keep up within a product-based business, right? Like it's different if you're in a service-based business, or well, not service, but like a SaaS sort of thing where like
Yeah,
you just sort of ship more of your software, right? Like easy
yeah,
peasy. But we actually have to make the stuff
yeah,
that we sell, right? So every unit has to be, so we have to be, so our inventory planning sort of takes a little bit longer. So it's really hard
yeah,
to actually sort of do forecasting, like where are we going to get to? What are we going to need? So in the past year, we sort of like pulled back a bit on that. And, we're growing at about 16% this year, but that's intentional because
yeah,
we kind of need to get our footing under us now and like focus on profitability and
yeah.
get everything kind of like dialed and move forward from here. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds kind of crazy, right? To intentionally slow down a company, but sometimes you have to. And when
Yeah.
you, to your point, you're a product-based business. I assume you're bringing in inventory ahead of
Yeah,
time. You're paying for that ahead of
exactly.
time, and then waiting until it goes through that cash cycle. So it's kind of, the faster you grow, the more cash you need
The more
to go.
cash and the more debt, right?
Yeah.
And you know, sort of financing those things, especially in Canada as a new company, is really hard, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
traditional bank debt on stuff like that is really kind of hard to come by. So you end up
Hmm.
sort of leaning into some of these other things that are available to you, which aren't great in terms of like a cash conversion cycle because they eat up all
Yeah.
your revenue, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Um,
There's more
you know,
expensive debt, right?
yeah, it's more
Yeah.
expensive debt. Now, the flip side of that is it allows you to actually grow, right?
Hmm.
And then
Yes.
demonstrate that you've got product market fit and that you have like a strong customer base and you've got strong repeat customers. And then you can go and, find some, replace it with more conventional debt or do like an
Yeah.
equity raise or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
is that the plan for you? Are you planning to
Yeah,
do
we're
an equity
about to,
raise?
we're gonna, well, I've been working on an equity raise like all week actually. So we're starting to get into that space, right? Because now,
Yeah.
um, what's in, like, I'm a D2C company, right? So direct to
Hmm.
consumer company, and
Hmm.
they've been like, it's just been brutal, right? Like the market conditions for D2C in the past little bit have
Yeah.
been,
Yeah.
um, like absolute garbage. And you think about guys like Warby Parker, the bigger Allbirds, right? Like a lot of these companies, but they were all VC financed, sort of back in
Yeah.
like sort of the 2020, late you know 2018, right? Like all that way through. There was a ton of money out there for it. It was VC financed, and it was growth at all costs,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that
That's
was
what
the
and
measure.
that's that VC mentality. Grow, 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 grow.
Grow. But I mean, the profitability on some of these things has
Yeah.
just been like impossible for them to keep up on. So
Hmm.
we sort of saw what was coming with that and said, okay, well, we actually need to, and I've got some great actually advisors who are in this space out of the US. And so they said, look, what we need to do is like focus on profitability. And actually you've got like a really, like your underlying metrics are really strong because you've got, a margin that's sort of strong enough for you to like survive this, and
Yeah.
you've got a returning customer in a niche market. And so our returning customer rate is really powerful, and women really love the brand when they find it,
Yeah.
and they come back to us over and over again. And so that's what gives us the, so when you think about sort of the lifetime value of your customer, it becomes compounding in terms of like, right, so you can acquire a customer at a
Yeah.
certain cost, let's say like $180 on like a Facebook ad or something like that. But
Hmm.
if your average order value is $300 and she comes back 40% of the time,
Yeah.
month over month, right? So we can track sort of all of that. So then you have this sort of compounding value of what's your underlying like lifetime value of your customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this like too
No, that's
nerdy?
no, no. You know what? I'm actually going to dive
You
into
thought we were
that
talking
more.
about fashion and we're talking about like compounding. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is more my speak here. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I want to dive into that a little bit more because you just talked about something where I think the vast majority of people that are in that e-commerce space don't fully ever understand, and that's the cost of customer acquisition
Oh yeah.
and the lifetime value of that customer. Because and just high level cost of customer acquisition for those that don't know, it's just how much does it take you to actually go and convert that customer? So you talked about, maybe it's $180 on a Facebook ad. Well, that
Right.
doesn't mean that that single person cost you $100. It means that you get X number of customers, you had, X
Yeah.
amount of dollars in marketing, therefore that's your conversion rate.
Yeah.
And if you can get something, I'll use your example there, is you're on the cost of customer acquisition of 180 and your lifetime value of that customer is, say 600 or $700. It's easy math to be able to say, yes, let's pour more money into marketing, or no, we need to
Totally.
rethink this strategy and go more niche. And I think there's
Totally.
so many people out there that don't understand that. And it
Yeah.
unfortunately
And you
bankrupts
know
them.
what? And I didn't understand it at the beginning either. I think,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
took, it took a couple years for us to sort of start to understand what was like, you kind of need to get into your averages, right? Like, what
Yes.
is the average order value of our customer? How often does she come back? And we now aim for actually first order profitability, right? So not even lifetime
Okay.
value,
Yeah.
right? Like, so we
Yeah.
now like so now what we have as our target under our ad stuff is like, what is that first order, right? Like, what's the threshold for profitability on the first order,
Got it. Yeah.
knowing that we still have this lifetime value to like continue to bank. But in terms of like cash flowing the business at the moment, we have to be profitable
Yeah.
in the first order. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so you're specifically focused on women, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you ever branch into the men's side, or is it no, let's just focus on this as our client?
Uh, I mean, I know women. I am a woman.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
like a lot of entrepreneurship builds out of what you need. I think that, like a lot of men say to me, when the hell are you making men's stuff? Because this seems like super, like I get
Yeah.
it. It's like totally fits kind of what I need. I have an email list of 35,000 women.
Yeah.
Does it makes more sense for me to develop a product that I can sell to that email list
Yeah.
than it
And goes
does
in.
for me to and completely like sort of shift my marketing strategy, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
at some point in time, yeah, we could entertain that, right? Especially once you've got enough traction and brand value in that. But
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
moment, no time soon.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good answer, actually. I think a lot of people try to jump into serving multiple clientele and different types of people, and it kind of takes away from their core, which actually alienates the people that are
Totally.
making the money, right? Because
Yeah,
and let's face
totally.
it, like for me to go and shop online to get a bunch of clothes, it's probably not going to happen, and if it does, it's not going to happen very often. You probably
Yeah,
also
men also
have the
don't shop as often, right? Although it's
yeah,
interesting because men do spend they will spend more on the individual when they go out for that time,
right,
right? Like they're
yeah,
much more inclined to be like, oh yeah, I'll go spend like 4 grand, let's say, if I'm getting ready for
yeah,
like if I'm suiting up for an office. Like I know that sounds upset, but I mean, if
yeah,
someone's going to go buy a whole bunch of suits and a whole bunch of shirts and silk ties and be like totally set, and then they won't
yeah,
need to do it for years, right? Like they'll be
years,
like,
yeah.
okay, I'm
Mm.
I'm done for now. Whereas women, it's definitely like more sort of this ongoing thing. And I think there's always been sort of more pressure on women for it to be, you know, always updated and always sort
Yeah.
of modern and in style.
Yes.
Um, and one of the things that we actually try to do is actually sort of lean into really classic, right? And so we're like, no, no, these are, but well done. So these are the pieces. This is like the perfect pencil skirt. And then you can,
Yeah.
if you want to pair it with like a new modern top or a new whatever, like you can go ahead and do that. But
Yeah. But the
um,
staples are
but
still
the
there's the
staples are
staple.
here and like
Yeah.
we do them and we do them well cut and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is one thing about men's clothes to your point versus women's is I mean it's been a shirt and a suit and dress pants and
Yeah, the
whatever for
style
men as long
shifts
as you
are
can
a lot
remember.
slower. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's even just like the way it shifts is definitely like slower,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Um, do you manufacture overseas to keep the cost lower, or how does that work?
Uh, well, it's interesting. That's an interesting question. So we were doing both. So
Okay.
I've manufactured in downtown Manhattan. I've manufactured in downtown Vancouver, and I've manufactured in China.
Okay.
So different, you know, you need sort of redundancy, really, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
recently, my downtown Vancouver or my Vancouver factory shut down because
Okay.
the owner died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a tough one.
there really isn't a manufacturing hub in Canada anymore. And so, there was no succession plan, there was nothing there. And you're like, okay, well, next. But that said, you know, the expense of that, um, like by the time we have to pay our Chinese factory in USD and we pay a
Mm,
17 or 18% import duty,
right.
it's not like the cost doesn't the cost wasn't exponentially higher to
Yeah.
manufacture in Canada. What
Yeah.
was interesting was the quality that we got overseas was higher
Really?
because yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so like we manufacture our factories in Shenzhen at the moment. We're looking
Yeah.
at trying to get into Vietnam, but we've got to get like higher quantities. So right now our MOQ is like 300 units per order.
Wow.
If I move to the Vietnamese factory that I want to move to, it's like 1,200. So we need to scale a bit more before we are able to do
Yeah.
that. Um, and different factories have different, things. But like even in Vancouver, like the buttonhole machine broke, and it took them 3 weeks to find somebody who could fix it.
That wouldn't
Right?
happen in China.
It doesn't have right. And certain things like the tailoring of the blazer, like they just had more. There was just, this is a place now where manufacturing is built into the entire culture,
Yeah.
the entire ecosystem.
It
It's what
drives a
they
lot of that
do.
economy.
It drives
Yeah.
the economy, and so the skill set is there, right? I mean, and
Mhm.
we talked to, I was like actually I was talking to someone last year about, there was a huge manufacturing hub in the Ukraine, right? So I'm like, well, how many like
Mm.
refugees and stuff are actually over here now who have that skill set? Is there the ability for us to like sort of create something? But it's difficult to create manufacturing hubs in Canada at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I would not have thought the quality was different, but it does make sense when you say it. That's what they do. That's what they're really good at.
It's what
So
they do,
yeah.
right? I mean, iPhones are made there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a certain yeah, like the level of the machinery, this and that. And there's a lot of, I mean, the factory that we work at does Alexander McQueen, Acne. These are like
Mhm.
luxury brands, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, this idea that somehow China only manufactures is,
Yeah. Yes.
that is not the case. And
Yeah.
in fact, like a lot of
Yeah.
the sweatshops have moved to like North Africa now, and so it's a different,
Mm.
sort of
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention. Doesn't mean you don't have to sort of be on the ball about like, well, who owns this? Where is this coming from? What's the
Yeah.
what are the standards there? Do your audits, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
With your advertising, is there a lot of word of mouth growth that's happening there, like that organic growth?
There is, it's harder for us to track, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, I know that there is, and then we do like I know that when we do pop-ups, especially, right? So we go to New York or we go to Toronto. I mean, haven't done one in a while. Actually, I got to sort of get
As
back
a
on the pop-up.
as a non-tech guy, pop-ups when you go into or sorry, not non-tech guy, a
Yeah, yeah.
non-fashion guy is where you go into a place temporarily, right?
Yeah, so it's like we'll rent out like a storefront or we do like something at an event and we basically set up our store, right? And you're there for anywhere from like a week to a month kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The longer ones, we haven't done a month-long one yet, and we really should because the word gets out and people are busy, especially our customers are busy, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and that's a chance for people to come down and touch and feel. So especially in sort of the e-com world, right? Like a lot of people will come and they just want to know what their size is and they want to see
Mhm.
the fabric and they want to hold the fabric and they want to get a sense of what they're buying. But then once they do, they don't need to come back into the store.
Yeah.
right? So
Then they
then
go
once
online.
then they go online. And so that's where your repeat customer sort of comes back. And so
Mhm.
that's why the pop-ups are great for us in terms of like exposure, because you get into a place, people get to come, you sort of overcome a bit of that hurdle that you've got sometimes with the purely online, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that happens all the time. Like I was on a flight to Toronto yesterday, and the woman sitting beside me was like, "Oh my God, I've seen your ads."
Oh,
Right. And I'm
cool.
like, "Oh, have you bought?" And she's like, "Oh, I need to touch it and feel it." And I was like, "Yeah, I get it." Right. Like, yeah.
Grab my
So that's,
skirt here.
yeah, I know. Right. Yeah. So that was the, like, so that's really the, that kind of stuff really helps us in
Mhm.
terms of like getting people sort of past that. But yeah, word of mouth there is a lot of word of mouth. I have like a few like hardcore, evangelicals out there who,
Yeah.
every once in a while, like I'll be at something and like my girlfriend Heather, like she'll like text me. She's like, "I'm at the Global Energy Show and your dress is being worn here, here, and here. Oh, and I've told so many people about it that they have to buy it and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "I just put you on the payroll, man. Like this is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's almost the almost like the cult mentality in a good way, right? Where
totally.
you're building
Yeah,
that brand and people are so passionate because it's high quality, because it's something that's needed.
yeah, right. And they like that people like to follow your story too, right? I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
um, and don't get me wrong, like this is hard, right? Like this is a cash flow beast, and I've
Yeah.
had like plenty of meltdowns,
Hmm.
like more than my fair share. And it's, but people really kind of get behind you, especially when
Hmm.
they feel like you're kind of out there doing something, you know, that they like and that they get, and that they get the reason why you're doing it, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, especially, I mean, I was like reading about like, Peter Nygaard, who was like up on like sexual harassed assault charge.
Yeah.
Like he was like a big, like had this big brand, and it's kind of like the number of dudes in sort of the women's wear space have been creepy over the years is like,
Oh,
exponential. So I
yeah,
mean,
I
I
can
think like a lot
imagine.
of like women are like, there's something really personal about women designing for women as well, right?
Yeah.
It's more about, no, I know what your problem is. Like, I know that if you're sitting on a panel on a stage, you want to make sure that the skirt like covers your knees, or that nobody's like staring right up your breast, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's, it's like you want to make sure that the blouse when you lean over isn't right. Like, so there's all these sort of things that I think we approach it as I approach it more as like I've been in this situation. I know what it means to be in the boardroom with DC. Like, and I know how you need to feel comfortable
Yeah.
and feel like you can just still be yourself,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to feel like you're sort of masking up or like overly sexualized in some weird outfit,
Yeah.
or like, or uncovered, you've got like the thin film of nylon covering your entire lower half of your body that like is scratchy and itchy. Like, ugh, I don't get it. Yeah.
Is it still a fairly male dominated industry?
N- Uh, N- no, but yes, like it's weird. Like it's women work the industry, right? So the number of like I work with a ton of incredible women,
Hmm.
and then amount of skill set of women who are working, but at the C-suite, there's still a lot of men, and
Right.
the
So it's
and the guys who,
unproportional.
yeah, and then like sort of the, in terms of like financing the stuff, it's always right. Like generally, it's
Hmm.
always men.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and that's been an interesting conversation for me too, when, when I'm talking about like doing equity raises or financing stuff, right? Because people are like, "Oh, how's your like little fashion project?" And you're like, I mean, think about
Yeah.
some of
This
who
is
the
a
wealthiest
business.
people, think about who some of the wealthiest people in the world are, even in Canada, are right now,
Yeah.
right? And it's like Chip Wilson, Brian Hill, Brian's like Aritzia, Chip
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
obviously Lulu,
Lulu. Yeah.
all the like the LVMH brand, right? Like it's a
Hmm.
hard business, but when
Hmm.
you get it right and you're properly capitalized and you can do it, and you've got like a really strong market, it's a great business,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
What are some of those challenges? I mean, when you have, say, a C-suite level that has more proportionately men than women in there, and you have to face some of those challenges. And there's a lot of ignorance and arrogance
Hmm.
still.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know it's 2024, but that shit has not gone away. We
Hmm.
know that.
Yeah.
How do you face those challenges, and how do you push through it and say, you know what, like F off?
Well, I mean, for me, a lot of it is around sort of like I think there's also sort of a bunch of stuff around, you know, how do I think about like equity financing and opportunity and things like that,
Mhm.
right? Like there's all these sort of statistics around like the number of women, women's access to capital and how women rate. And I think there was something sort of innate in me that was like, no, I got to do this by myself, right? I can't ask people for money. And it felt like I was asking people for money as opposed to giving people an opportunity,
Right.
right? And there's also this interesting sort of dichotomy where like wealthy women are often asked to donate to causes but not invest in things in the same way
Interesting.
that like wealthy men are, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um and I mean, I admit that like some of my own mindset, like I was out for a financier in Calgary took me out for lunch because he read some LinkedIn post of mine and it was like, I should talk to you, we should do some stuff, whatever. And I was like telling him, I'm like, I have this thing about like it's really weird for me to like feel like I need to go out and raise money. And he
Mhm.
was like, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like it's just like, of course you need money. Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
why would you not need money to grow the business? It's like
Yeah.
like that is just so dumb, Emma. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, right. Yeah, that is. So I
Yeah.
think there's like I don't know if it like I think there's definitely like for whatever reason I guess I maybe it was because I considered myself sort of a helper. Or I was in the legal services, or I was on the side of
Mhm.
things where I felt like I can fix all these things myself, or I can solve
Yeah.
the problem. And it's like, no, I need to get, you know, I need people to come in and like back this and to like take it to the
Yeah.
next level. So now though, I'm like, I've got, you know, outside advisors who've come in. I've got a friend of mine who's actually she was the former managing partner at a big one of the big four part
Mm.
companies,
Yeah.
big fours in Calgary, and she's amazing. She's just like, we're going to structure your deal, and this is what it's going to look like, and we're going to go for it, and blah blah. And she's like, this is like, let's go. And she's amazing. She's kind of like a yeah. I mean, she's been out there with all the big guys for a long time, right? And
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
she's just
She
like, no,
plays
I'm
in
going to
that
show you.
world.
Yeah, and she's an incredible mentor in that way for me, right? Because she's like, no, I'm going to show you how this is done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I'm very grateful for that.
So what does a day in the life for you look like? And I mean, I'm sure it's chaotic and all over the place, but what does that look like?
My ideal day in the life, or a
No,
true.
no. All of our ideal days in life are very different, especially as an entrepreneur. Your true
Yeah,
day
I
in the
know,
life.
right? Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it depends sort of on what phase and cycle we're in. Lately I've been like cash flow hell.
Mhm.
Because we had this sort of factory closure. I lost a bunch of WIP, right? Like figuring out sort of
Yeah.
inventory management as I sort of, move through some of that. So a lot of that is, um, starting the day with like kind of emails and just catching up with stuff, managing like what's the finance side of things look like, where are we
Yeah.
at in terms of like, are we on plan, right? So that we do like a weekly reporting thing. So it's like, how many units of stuff did we sell? Um, last week? Did we meet plan, right?
Yeah.
Did we sell more of like one thing than another? How many more units do we have in stock of this? When do we need to place a reorder for it? Right. So just
Yeah.
sort of like the management of kind of the inventory side of things. Then of course there's the looking at the marketing side of things. So that's like, all right, so where are we advertising? How much budget do we have? What platforms are working for us? What platforms are not working for us? And these are things we look at on like literally a weekly, daily basis, right?
Yeah.
So there's all,
Well,
and
it's very
then
fluid, right? It moves quickly on that in that world.
yeah, and then there's communicating with the teams that are doing that. So then there's like copy review. There's also like, hey Emma, here's a creative brief. I need you to like film a video of yourself doing this, this, and this, and this. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
fine. So I go and do all of that, right? So I have to post on Instagram and
Yeah.
figure all that stuff out. So it's kind of like flipping from like literally like doing my hair and doing some setting up a tripod in my room and doing the video to like then getting on the data analytics of what the back end of, you know, our Facebook advertising platform looks like, you know, and then figuring out like, what's the hook that's working this week, or, you know, oh shit, we've got this ad running and why isn't it converting? Well, it's because we're out of stock of our best-selling size in that pant. So kill that ad, put up this one, that kind of thing. There's obviously like distribution stuff. There's, you know, just general promotion, things like this, talking about the business, you know, getting out there, meeting with customers, communicating with customers. I have a lot of customers who will email me directly. I try to encourage that because it's actually how we learn how to do, you know, product.
The direct
like,
feedback. Yeah.
The direct feedback product better. And then there's always like the, you know, the usual sort of like HR stuff and, you know, just the general daily management. And then when we're in, like this morning, or sorry, rather this afternoon, we had a fitting, right? So that was sort of more of a development meeting. So that was, we've got some new pants that we're looking at. We've got a couple new styles. So what does that look like? Is the, you know, here's the fit of it. Do we want to take an inch out here? Do we want to change the width of the strap, the detail of this? Is this the fabric that's working for us in this pant, or should we use a different fabric? What's the rise of the pant? Do we like the drape? How many times have we put it through a wash test?
There's a lot of things to think about.
It's like context switching, like all day long.
Yeah.
Totally. It's like, it's just context switching all day long. And then of course, right now I'm in like the financing round. So it was like, okay, you know, making sure that the minute book is up to date, making sure that we've got like the, you know, what is the pricing strategy that we're going out with, that we communicated with former investors around sort of the new pricing strategy. What are we doing about setting up meetings? What does the deck look like? Have I got this slide in? What's the recent cap table slide? What are we putting in terms of financial statements? Blah, 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 blah. Or, you know, and then of course, when you're doing, and then when you're doing the decks on this stuff, right? Like I find like I'm so in the weeds of it all. And then I can feel like, so I have to send it to people because I'm like, am I telling the story here properly? Or have I like jumped ahead 7 things and I've gotten myself lost in the weeds of some minutia that nobody gives
like
a fuck
too much
about.
detail, nobody cares. They're coming into invest, they don't need to know that.
Exactly. Right, you know, and you're and I find sometimes, like I think as a founder it's really sometimes hard to like, you're like, you need people to like kind of bring you back up, right? You're like, right.
Well, and you're passionate about a lot of that stuff too, that investors might not give a shit, but you're passionate about it. So
totally.
It's a give and take too, right?
Yeah. And then it's like, oh yeah, what's the side of it that the, you know, like somebody would be like, well, do you know about this? And it's like, well, of course I know about that. Like, well, you know, and they're like, well, why isn't that in there? I'm like, oh, right. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you a twofold question here. If somebody's looking to buy your product, the website for that, and then if somebody wanted to reach out, connect, get to know more about you, where would they find you there?
LinkedIn I'm great on. So it's Emma May, and then Emma at SophieGrace.ca, and our website is SophieGrace.ca.
Awesome. And I did take a perusal through it before this podcast. The website's awesome. It looks great.
Oh, thank you.
And
thanks, Matt.
Again, I'm not a fashion guy, but it looks pretty fashionable.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thanks a
lot.
Well,
definitely want to thank you for being on the show. We're definitely gonna have to catch up at some point to see how everything's progressed and the growth of the company. And I'll make sure I keep my eye on that for sure. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll chat soon.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.